Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take the vast, overwhelming landscape of information, your notes, articles, research, and try to carve a shortcut straight to the most fascinating, necessary insights.
Our goal is to arm you, the curious learner, with the context and, those aha moments you need to feel truly well-informed, but without all the academic exhaustion.
And today, our sources guide us through a life that didn't just meet the highest standards of mathematics, but, well, fundamentally rewrote them.
We are talking about the life and the truly revolutionary work of Maryam Mirzakhani.
When you think about the pinnacle of achievement in math, the Fields Medal has to be it. It's always described as the Nobel Prize of mathematics.
And for good reason.
But since it was first awarded back in 1936, there's this shocking fact. For 78 long years, the award had only ever been given to men.
It's an incredible statistic. And that decades-long pattern was broken, and broken definitively, in 2014. That was when Maryam Mirzakhani, an Iranian-born genius and professor at Stanford, became the first woman to receive the honor.
So our mission today is a true deep dive. We're not just going to, summarize her incredible biography.
No, we wanted to dissect the core of her intellectual contribution. Her ability to connect these seemingly separate fields, things like complex geometry, statistical mechanics, even chaos theory, into one unified picture.
We want to understand the why behind the worldwide acclaim she earned in what was a tragically short life.
Exactly. Our sources, and we've got biographical accounts, we have summaries of her work, personal anecdotes. They give us a really clear view of her entire journey.
Right, from her earliest days of brilliance in Tehran, all the way to the global tributes that were paid after her death in 2017.
And for just a quick taste of the kind of breakthrough we're about to explore, know this: her work involves concepts as simple visually as playing billiards.
But she wasn't interested in the ball's path on a static table?
Not at all. She studied the rules that govern the table itself as it constantly changes shape. And she proved that even this dynamic, high-dimensional chaos is actually governed by a simple, elegant order.
That is just an incredible concept to even start with.
That ability to conceptualize these complex transformations visually and then subject them to rigorous analysis, that's the hallmark of her genius. She was the first woman and the first Iranian to win the Fields Medal. But more importantly, her work just fundamentally advanced our understanding of hyperbolic geometry, topology, and dynamics.
So let's trace that path of determination, starting right at the beginning.
Let's do it.
Maryam Mirzakhani was born in Tehran, Iran in 1977. And her academic environment, it wasn't just any school. It was specifically designed to foster elite talent.
Right. She attended the Tehran Farzanighan School, which is part of something called NODET.
The National Organization for Development of Exceptional Talents.
Exactly. And being in that system, it put her on a kind of academic fast track, surrounding her with these other incredibly brilliant young minds.
And her ascent was, meteoric doesn't even feel like a strong enough word.
It really doesn't. By the time she was in high school, she was already competing at the absolute highest national level. She won the gold medal in the Iranian National Olympiad for mathematics.
For both her junior and senior years.
Both years. And this wasn't just, a nice high school prize. This was an academic passport.
Exactly. That achievement was so significant that in the incredibly competitive Iranian system, it allowed her to bypass the National College Entrance Exam.
The concours.
The concours entirely. And it is really hard to overstate what a massive accomplishment that is for a young student in that environment.
It's huge. It basically confirmed she was operating on a completely different intellectual plane.
And that plane very quickly extended beyond Iran's borders.
Oh, absolutely. She moved on to the ultimate international stage.
Yeah.
The International Mathematical Olympiad, the IMO.
So in 1994, she competes in Hong Kong.
And becomes the first Iranian woman ever to win a gold medal. And she got an outstanding score, 41 out of 42 points.
What's so fascinating here is just the immediate, continuous upward trajectory. She wasn't satisfied with one gold medal.
No, not at all. The very next year, 1995, in Toronto, she achieves an even rarer milestone. She becomes the first Iranian ever to get a perfect score.
A full 42 out of 42.
A perfect score. And she secures her second consecutive IMO gold medal.
So these successes, they really established her not just as a national talent, but as a global mathematical force before she had even started university.
And we also see the importance of collaboration very early on. She worked closely with her colleague and fellow Olympiad medalist Roya Beheshti-Zavara.
Right. They co-authored a book together.
A foundational textbook in Persian, elementary number theory, challenging problems. It was published in 1999, and it just highlights their shared ambition, their deep foundational knowledge.
But this shared journey of these brilliant young minds, it was interrupted by a national tragedy, one that marked the lives of both Mirzakhani and Zavara and really impacted the entire Iranian academic community.
In 1998, they were returning from a conference in Avaz. They were on a bus, and it was full of other gifted individuals, former Olympiad competitors, students.
And the bus tragically fell off a cliff.
Yes. 7 passengers were killed. All of them were students from Sharif University, which is the nation's premier technical institution.
And Mirzakhani and Zavara were among the few survivors. I mean, this event was remembered as a national catastrophe in Iran, a profound loss of intellectual capital.
To endure something like that, a shared trauma, especially at such a formative age, it just underscores the relentless determination she would later show in her work.
Absolutely. When you look at her later description of mathematical exploration, she said it's like being lost in a jungle.
Right.
You can't help but connect that metaphor of perseverance to her early experience of resilience after such a devastating event.
It must have forged an unshakable sense of purpose.
So after the crash, she continued her academic path with, it seems, a renewed focus. She got her Bachelor of Science in Mathematics from Sharif University in 1999.
And even during her undergraduate years, she was already showing that characteristic ability to simplify complex ideas. She developed a notably simpler proof for a theorem that had been established by Issei Schur.
Which is incredible for an undergraduate.
It's unheard of. Her focus then shifted west. She moved to the United States for her graduate work and earned her PhD in 2004 from Harvard.
And this period was pivotal. She studied under the guidance of Curtis T. McMullen, who was himself a Fields Medalist. This was the environment where her unique approach really crystallized.
And our sources describe her during those Harvard years as being, quote, distinguished by determination and relentless questioning.
She wasn't the fastest student, but she was the most persistent in digging for those fundamental truths.
And there's that beautiful anecdote that gives us a glimpse into her intellectual process. She took her class notes in her native language, in Persian.
That suggests such a deep intellectual independence.
I think so. It suggests she preferred processing these incredibly complex, universal mathematical ideas through the deeply rooted framework of her own core thought structure, rather than just, adopting English as the sole language of her internal mathematical dialogue.
It speaks volumes about the depth of her focus. So after Harvard, she moves pretty quickly through research positions at the Clay Mathematics Institute, professorships at Princeton.
And eventually she settles at Stanford University in 2009. And that's where the bulk of her field's medal-winning research was conducted.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Let's get into the core research that cemented her place in history. Her work beautifully, and I think unexpectedly, integrated several highly specialized fields.
It really did. We're talking about Teichmüller theory, hyperbolic geometry, ergodic theory, and symplectic geometry.
And if those terms sound daunting to you, don't worry. The key is to understand the terrain she was mapping. She was in the world of the geometry of curved surfaces.
Right. Surfaces where the rules of Euclidean geometry, flat space, they just don't apply anymore. These are formerly known as Riemann surfaces.
So we need to set the scene by defining, 3 core concepts, the building blocks of her universe.
I think that's a good way to put it. First, let's revisit geodesics.
A geodesic is the straightest possible line on a curved surface.
Right. Think of it like this. If you're flying from New York to Tokyo, your plane takes the shortest path. On a flat map, that path looks curved, but it's actually a segment of a great circle on the curved Earth.
That path is the geodesic, the path as shortest distance.
Exactly. Then you have the specific type she focused on, which are simple closed geodesics.
Okay, so these are paths that loop back on themselves. They're closed curves, but they have one critical characteristic.
They do not cross themselves. They're the cleanest, simplest closed loops you can possibly have on a given curved surface.
Like wrapping a rubber band around a donut. The simplest loop that doesn't intersect itself.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the third concept, which is the theater for all of her work, the moduli space.
Let's stick with the donut analogy.
Okay. A donut or a torus is a Riemann surface with a genus. That's the number of holes of 1. You can stretch that donut, you can flatten it, twist it, expand it.
But as long as it still has one hole, it's topologically the same surface.
Precisely. And moduli space is, conceptually, the space of all possible donuts. with that fixed number of holes or any fixed genus.
So it's not just one donut. Moduli space is this high-dimensional catalog where every single point in that space represents a unique, specific shape or complex structure that the surface can take.
That's it. If you move from one point in moduli space to another, the surface itself, the donut, is changing its geometry. Mirzakhani focused intensely on this incredibly complex, high-dimensional space.
And her groundbreaking work, the basis of her 2004 PhD thesis, was centered on solving a critical, long-standing counting problem within this universe of shapes.
Yes. And asking why counting these simple loops was such a profound mathematical challenge is the right question.
So why was it?
This is where we see that transition from chaos to order. Mathematicians had already solved a similar problem for all closed geodesics. That includes the simple ones and the ones that cross themselves multiple times.
And this was known as the prime number theorem for geodesics.
Correct. And what that revealed was, well, chaos, or at least extremely rapid growth. The total number of all closed geodesics of length less than some value L, it grows exponentially with L.
Exponentially. So the number just explodes as the maximum length increases.
It explodes. If you allow the path to cross, you get an astronomical number of possibilities very, very quickly.
Okay, so allowing crossings creates this explosive, chaotic set of solutions.
Exactly. But the counting problem for just the simple closed geodesics, the non-crossing foundational loops that remained stubbornly unsolved.
Even though experts recognized this simpler subset as, what was the quote, the key object to unlocking the structure and geometry of the whole surface.
Yes, the simple loops are the geometric building blocks. And this is the wall that Mirzakhani climbed.
So what did she find? What did she discover about the growth rate of these fundamental building blocks?
She proved in her thesis that the number of simple closed geodesics of length less than L grows not exponentially, but polynomially in L.
Which is a fundamentally slower, much more orderly rate of growth.
Infinitely more orderly. If we want to visualize the difference, exponential growth is like compound interest running wild. It eventually overwhelms any container.
Whereas polynomial growth is more managed, a structured increase.
Yes. So she proved that the universe of these essential building blocks is far more constrained and mathematically orderly than the universe of all possible chaotic curves.
Do we know the specific formula?
We do. She showed the growth is asymptotic to a formula, c times L to the power of 6g minus 6, where g is the genus, or the number of holes, and c is a constant related to the volume.
So that polynomial term L to the 6g minus 6, it's manageable, it's predictable, and it's structurally determined by the number of holes in the surface.
Exactly. But the real intellectual breakthrough wasn't just finding the formula. It was the method she used. That was the connection that won her the Fields Medal.
Right, the method was the revolutionary part.
It was. Counting problems like this are typically solved using, combinatorial or dynamical methods. Mirzakhani approached it by connecting the counting problem, which is about lengths and number,
to the problem of computing volumes within that high-dimensional universe of all possible shapes, the moduli space itself.
Precisely.
That sounds incredibly unintuitive. I mean, how do you bridge that gap, connecting a one-dimensional measure, like the length of a curve, to a multi-dimensional measure, like the volume of a space?
Well, the insight lies in how she decomposed the moduli space. She showed that counting the simple geodesics could be reformulated as a problem of integrating a volume form, which is a highly technical type of calculus, over the moduli space of surfaces with boundaries. These are called bordered Riemann surfaces.
So she established a relationship where the total sort of capacity or volume of the moduli space dictated the number of simple loops that surface could support.
That's a great way of thinking about it. It's like saying the total space available in the catalog, the volume, must equal the sum of its most fundamental parts, the counted loops.
It's a stroke of genius that brought together geometry, analysis, and topology.
And this deep relationship between length, counting, and volume even allowed her to derive a new proof for a major formula discovered by Edward Witten and Maxim Kuntsevich.
So she used one massive geometric insight to solve two major problems and provide a fresh perspective on a third.
She did. And once she established this link between static volumes and counting, her work naturally shifted from static calculation into the dynamics, the movement of these surfaces.
That's where she entered the realm of Teichmüller dynamics of moduli space.
Right. And in particular, she applied her volume integration techniques to tackle the behavior of William Thurston's famous earthquake flow.
Earthquake flow is such a wonderfully evocative name. How does that work?
It's highly visual. Imagine you have a surface, say a curved saddle or a donut. An earthquake map is defined by choosing one of those simple closed geodesics she counted. You then cut the surface along it.
Okay.
Then you slide the two cut edges past each other by some specified amount and re-glue the surface back up.
So the topology, the number of holes, that stays the same. But the geometry, the shape, and the curvature changes dramatically. The surface literally shifts its physical form.
Exactly, like a strike-slip fault in geology.
Oh.
And if you repeat this process infinitely or take the continuous limit of these operations, you get the earthquake flow. The entire high-dimensional moduli space, the universe of all possible shapes, is being explored by this rule-governed continuous deformation.
That flow seems inherently chaotic and complex. Was she able to predict the long-term behavior of this shape-shifting system?
She was. She proved a long-standing conjecture that Thurston's earthquake flow on Teichmüller space is ergodic, which is a really powerful concept from statistical mechanics and dynamical systems.
For the listener, what does ergodicity mean in this context for these constantly deforming surfaces?
It means that the system, as it undergoes this earthquake flow over a long period of time, eventually explores its entire available space. Think of it like a randomized trajectory.
So if you run the transformation long enough, every possible shape and structure within that moduli space will, theoretically, be visited or sampled.
Exactly. It behaves as if the probability of being in any region of that high-dimensional space is proportional to the volume of that region.
So if I were tracking the path of one specific surface as it undergoes this earthquake flow, Mirzakhani's work tells us that eventually every possible shape the universe of donuts could take is inherent in that single surface's long-term trajectory.
That is a perfect way to rephrase it. She showed that the volume calculations she had pioneered to solve the counting problem could, in fact, illuminate the long-term dynamic behavior of these surfaces. She used volume to define the map, and then she used volume to prove the map was complete.
It's an incredibly tight intellectual structure.
It's beautiful.
It is abundantly clear why this body of work, tying together geometry, combinatorics, analysis, dynamics, why it was deemed monumental.
The world certainly recognized it in 2014 when she was awarded the Fields Medal for, and I'm quoting, her outstanding contributions to the dynamics and geometry of Riemann surfaces and their moduli spaces. She was 37 years old.
And again, we just have to underline the historical importance of this. The first woman and the first Iranian to win the prize since it was founded in 1936. This wasn't just a mathematical achievement, it was a cultural and social turning point.
It really was. The recognition was immediate and universally celebrated, even garnering praise from the Iranian president at the time, Hassan Rouhani.
So here's where it gets really interesting, diving deeper into those dynamics using that metaphor we started with.
The billiard table analogy.
Yes, from Jordan Ellenberg, a fellow mathematician. I find it's the most useful way to visualize this abstract work.
It's perfect because it takes this complex geometry and it grounds it in a dynamic, relatable visual.
So Ellenberg explained that Mirzakhani studied billiards, but not on a simple rectangle like we know. She studied billiards on surfaces with complicated geometries, like polygons.
Right. If you imagine a billiard ball traveling, its path is determined by straight lines and the reflections off the edges. But in her work, she studied the universe of all possible billiard tables, the moduli space.
And the genius part, though, is that the dynamics she studied were not the ball's motion on a static table,
But the transformation of the table itself. The table changes its shape in a rule-governed way, essentially performing its own earthquake flows. She wasn't solving for the ball's path. She was solving for the geometric rules of this space where the ball lives.
This shift from studying geometry to studying the dynamics of geometry is what allowed her to expose these hidden structures.
And that focus on hidden structure became the subject of her most profound and cited later work, a collaboration with Alex Eskin and with input from Amir Mohammadi, published right around the time she won the Fields Medal in 2014.
The magic wand theorem.
Unofficially, yes. It got that name because it's so unexpectedly tied together dynamical systems, geometry, and topology in this incredibly rigid way. They were investigating the paths of complex geodesics, the shortest paths in this dynamic moduli space, and looking at where those paths end up, their closures.
You would expect that if the space is constantly deforming, these paths would be messy, chaotic, maybe fractal, just wandering everywhere without a pattern.
That's exactly what many people expected, given the complex, high-dimensional nature of the moduli space. But their finding was the complete opposite. They proved that the closures of these complex geodesics are surprisingly regular, or mathematically rigid.
Okay, what does it mean for a closure to be rigid in this context?
It means that instead of the path wandering chaotically, its long-term trajectory is confined to very specific, orderly subspaces. And crucially, they found that these closures are algebraic objects.
Okay, let's stop and define that for the listener. If something is an algebraic object, why is that so significant for a geometric path?
Well, if a path is algebraic, it means that even though it exists in a complex, high-dimensional space, its location can be perfectly described by a simple system of polynomial equations.
So instead of finding a cloud of unpredictable, messy dots,
She found that all the dots defining the trajectory eventually settle onto the surface of, say, a perfect sphere or a perfect hyperbola. There's an elegant, simple equation hiding in all that high-dimensional mess.
that is profound. It suggests a fundamental simplicity beneath all the apparent geometric chaos.
And here's the true astonishment, which ties back to the bigger picture. This discovery of rigidity in moduli space is analogous to the celebrated results Marina Ratner arrived at back in the 1990s.
But Ratner's work concerned homogeneous spaces, right?
Right. And we should define the difference. Homogeneous space is one where the geometry is uniform everywhere. It's smooth, predictable, it looks the same no matter where you are, like the surface of a perfect sphere or a simple lattice. Ratner proved that dynamic paths in those uniform spaces are rigid, a huge discovery.
But Mirzakhani was working in moduli space, which is highly inhomogeneous.
Correct. Moduli space is the opposite of uniform. It's complex, convoluted, high-dimensional. The geometry is constantly changing. It's messy. So finding that Ratner-like algebraic rigidity in this complex, inhomogeneous environment was considered, well, nearly impossible.
So she proved that the elegant, orderly mathematical rules that govern smooth, uniform spaces also apply to the messy, dynamic, complex world of shape-shifting geometry.
Yes. The International Mathematical Union, in their citation, I think they captured the wonder best. They said, "It is astounding to find that the rigidity in homogeneous spaces has an echo in the inhomogeneous world of moduli space."
Wow.
This theorem just cemented her reputation. She could deploy tools from classical analysis, geometry, dynamics, and reveal these fundamental hidden unities that connect entirely different mathematical universes. It was the ultimate cross-disciplinary proof.
It really does sound like a unifying theory for her field. She was drawing connections that other people just couldn't see because they were too focused on the boundaries between disciplines.
And that speaks to the patience and determination we talked about earlier. These are not quick answers. They require immense foundational knowledge, combined with a willingness to look for connections far, far afield.
That persistence is the thread we see running right through her personal approach to mathematics as well.
Moving from the density of her theorems to her personal approach, Mirzakhani characterized herself with great humility as a slow mathematician. She believed deeply that, quote, "You have to spend some energy and effort to see the beauty of math."
That perspective is so key. In a world that often rewards speed and immediate results, she emphasized deep patience and sustained, determined effort. It's not just about brilliance, it's about endurance in the face of complexity.
It really echoes the resilience we saw after that bus crash in 1998.
It does. And that sustained effort also manifested in a really unique, highly visual process. Her problem-solving method was famous for involving constant doodles.
Literally drawings and sketches on these large sheets of paper, which she would then surround with mathematical formulas and equations.
It sounds like she was building a physical visual bridge between the abstract ideas and the formal algebraic structures. And her own daughter, Anahita, she gave the most charming description of this process.
Right, she famously described her mother's work simply as painting.
It's beautiful.
And Mirzakhani herself offered that incredible analogy for developing new proofs.
It is like being lost in a jungle and trying to use all the knowledge that you can gather to come up with some new tricks, and with some luck, you might find a way out.
The visual doodles were the maps she was drawing while lost in that jungle. The complexity of the moduli space required a physical, intuitive approach that went beyond pure algebra.
It's just an inspiring image. The most decorated mind in modern math, sitting on the floor, doodling geometric shapes and patterns, patiently trekking through that jungle until she found that elegant exit.
Her personal life was centered in Palo Alto, California. She lived there with her husband, Jan Vondrak.
A Czech theoretical computer scientist and applied mathematician, also a professor at Stanford.
And their daughter.
Tragically, this career in life, defined by such immense intellectual energy, was cut short. She was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2013, the year before she won the Fields Medal.
The cancer metastasized, spreading to her bones and liver in 2016, and she passed away on July 14, 2017, at the incredibly young age of 40.
Her passing elicited this tremendous global response, signaling the deep impact she had beyond just academia, especially in her native Iran.
Yes, the Iranian president at the time, Rouhani, offered condolences and highlighted her brilliance as a, quote, turning point in showing the great will of Iranian women and young people.
And following her death, we saw a remarkable cultural moment. Several Iranian newspapers and President Rouhani himself on social media, they published photographs of Mirzakhani with her hair uncovered.
Which was a notable breaking of a societal taboo. It was widely recognized by both Iranian and Western press as this profound gesture of respect and recognition for her global stature.
It felt like her achievement transcended the standard societal norms and was just recognized universally within Iran.
Her death also spurred a really important political debate there regarding citizenship law. Because she was married to a foreigner, her daughter wasn't automatically eligible for Iranian nationality under the laws at the time.
Right. And Fars News Agency reported that after her death, 60 Iranian MPs urged speeding up an amendment to the law.
Specifically to make it easier for the children of Iranian mothers married to foreigners like Mirzakhani's daughter to obtain Iranian nationality. It just highlights how her legacy directly intersected with and influenced national policy debates.
But the truly enduring aspect of her legacy is how it has been cemented into the very structure of international mathematics. Her birthday, May 12, was declared International Women in Mathematics Day.
Which is just a profound and perpetual tribute, not just to her memory, but to inspiring future generations.
And the list of honors tied to her name, it ensures her influence is continuously multiplied. The Breakthrough Prize Foundation established the Maryam Mirzakhani New Frontiers Prize,
a $50,000 award. It's specifically dedicated to supporting outstanding early career women mathematicians who've completed their PhDs within the past 2 years. So it actively ensures her name is synonymous with nurturing female brilliance in the field.
And the institutional honors are just expansive. She was the first Iranian woman elected to the National Academy of Sciences. Her former high school, Sharif University, they both named facilities after her.
There is now a lunar crater named Mirzakhani, and the asteroid 321357 Mirzakhani is orbiting the Sun in her honor.
And in the academic sphere, the University of Oxford launched the Maryam Mirzakhani Scholarships, providing specific doctoral support for female mathematicians at the university.
It's incredible. In the brief years since her passing, she has created this perpetual, global, and highly functional mechanism for recognizing and supporting the next generation of mathematical innovators. Her determination, her resilience, her unique perspective, they become the standard for excellence.
What an incredible intellectual journey we've traced today. From a young woman achieving consecutive IMO gold medals, surviving a national tragedy that defined her resilience,
Earning a PhD under a Fields Medalist, and ultimately becoming a revolutionary thinker who redefined the very relationship between geometry, volume, and dynamics.
her central innovation was that intellectual flexibility, the ability to look at counting, length, and trajectory and realize that the key to unlocking those problems was in calculating the total capacity, the volume of the high-dimensional space they live in.
She bridged entire mathematical worlds with volume integration.
And the lasting central lesson for us is the value of her slow, visual, jungle trekking approach. When she finally turned that volume integration tool onto the question of dynamics, the constantly shape-shifting billiard table.
Her most famous proofs show that even in that high-dimensional, inhomogeneous mess, there was an elegant algebraic structure. She found rigidity in the chaos.
And that rigidity theorem is the ultimate metaphor for how breakthroughs happen. Her work linked the world of homogeneous spaces, where geometry is smooth and uniform, to the complex, constantly changing, inhomogeneous world of moduli space.
She showed us that the elegant, simple mathematical rules we discover in predictable settings have a profound, hidden echo in the most complex spaces we previously thought were just irregular or fractal.
So what does this all mean for you? Mirzakhani's work really encourages us to question our assumptions about chaos and complexity.
If the structure of a constantly deforming, infinite universe of shapes can follow a simple algebraic rule, then what other areas of science, or even your own life, that seem messy or complicated or irregular
Might actually hold a hidden, elegant algebraic structure? What jungle might you be exploring right now? A business problem, a creative pursuit, a scientific puzzle that requires a magic wand theorem to link seemingly unrelated ideas or disciplines?
Embrace the complexity. Don't be afraid to doodle your way to the solution, and just keep looking for the underlying patterns.
Welcome to The Debate. Our focus today is on the unparalleled contributions of Maryam Mirzakhani, the first woman and first Iranian Fields Medalist whose work transformed geometry and dynamics before her untimely death in 2017.
And her achievements were just so expansive. They stretched across Teichmüller theory, hyperbolic geometry, ergodic theory, and symplectic geometry. I mean, the sheer breadth of her output makes her legacy incredibly complex to categorize. It almost forces you to prioritize which contributions carry the most significant mathematical weight.
Exactly. So the question we're really digging into today is this. What's the core of her work? Did she fundamentally succeed by providing these precise quantitative solutions to long-standing problems? Or was it by offering these incredible structural, qualitative breakthroughs about the dynamics of moduli space? I'm going to argue for the primacy of the quantitative results and the volume computations.
And I'll be arguing for the primacy of the structural, dynamic, and rigidity insights.
Okay, I see where you're coming from with that, but let me offer a different perspective, one that's really rooted in the immediate, verifiable utility of her early work. Mirzakhani's defining early achievement, and this is what the International Mathematical Union Committee explicitly cited, was the solution to the long-standing open problem of counting simple closed geodesics on hyperbolic Riemann surfaces.
Right.
And this wasn't just, counting in an abstract. The previous result, which was sort of analogous to the prime number theorem for geodesics, it established that the total number of closed geodesics grows exponentially, something like e to the L over L. But the simple closed geodesics, well, they were far more elusive. Mirzakhani's 2004 PhD thesis gave the precise polynomial asymptotic count for the simple ones, CL to the power of 6g minus 6, where g is the genus. That asymptotic formula, that specific number, represents a decisive quantitative metric breakthrough. And this wasn't an isolated numerical curiosity. It was fundamentally tied to calculating volumes in moduli space. Her later work established a volume formula for the moduli space of bordered Riemann surfaces. And crucially, this volume computation became the mechanism for a new, and frankly simpler, proof of the famous Edward Witten maxim concident formula. This foundation in explicit calculation, linking counting to geometric volumes and then to topological structures, that is the mathematical bedrock that earned her early acclaim.
And that's an interesting point, though I would frame the impact a bit differently. While the counting theorem was absolutely brilliant, foundational, Mirzakhani's greatest intellectual leap, the one that really revealed her profound insight into structural analogies, it came not in the early quantification, but in her later work on Teichmüller dynamics.
Okay.
The focus really shifted from counting the objects within the space to understanding the structure of the space itself. The IMU press release highlighted the, and I'm quoting here, surprising regularity and rigidity properties of complex geodesics and their closures in moduli space. I'm talking about the celebrated results with Alex Eskin and Amir Mohammadi.
Sure, but the counting...
See, that's where I'm not quite convinced that the quantitative output is the core legacy. For me, the truly profound insight in that later work was showing that, quote, the rigidity principles established in homogeneous spaces have an echo in the inhomogeneous world of moduli space. This realization is structural, it's conceptual, it redefines the architecture of the space, and on top of that, her earlier proof that William Thurston's earthquake flow is ergodic, a qualitative property confirming the system explores its entire phase space, that is essential for unlocking the dynamics at the heart of geometry. These structural revelations, I think, are more foundational than any specific calculation that depends on them.
The quantitative solution provided an explicit numerical structure, where before we only had these high-level growth rates. Benson-Farb even noted that she quantified, quote, the key object to unlocking the structure and geometry of the whole surface. The asymptotic formula, CL to the power of 6g minus 6, is a decisive metric result. It's concrete, it's precise, and it immediately provided utility for other investigations. We knew how fast these things grew exponentially overall. But knowing exactly how fast the simple ones grow polynomially, that gives us tangible control over the very objects that define the complexity of the surface.
I agree that the L to the 6 G minus 6 formula is powerful, but the conceptual impact of the rigidity theorem is arguably greater. I mean, the moduli space is inherently complicated. It's a highly curved, inhomogeneous space without the symmetries of classical homogeneous spaces, where, Ratner's work applied. So, establishing that complex geodesics and their closures in this space are surprisingly regular, that they exhibit dynamic rigidity rather than some kind of fractal irregularity that fundamentally alters how the dynamics are understood and studied. That conceptual bridge, that echo, that's the breakthrough. It gives mathematicians a powerful new toolset, the tools of homogeneous dynamics and ergodic theory, to apply to a previously intractable, inhomogeneous geometric space. It's a structural shift in approach. We move from calculating measures of static objects to understanding the flow and evolution of the space itself.
But if we're talking about impact, we have to talk about solving long-standing difficult problems. You're focusing on the metastructure, but my position is focused on the utility of the result. That precision in the L to the 6 G minus 6 formula, isn't that the ultimate tangible proof of mastery? It proves the existence of an underlying metric organization that can then be exploited for specific numerical answers.
I just come at it from a different way. I mean, the overall description of her work often references the magic wand theorem, this unification that tied together dynamical systems, geometry, and topology. And I think this unification is most powerfully demonstrated by the ergodic theory and rigidity results, which intrinsically blend those fields. When Jordan Ellenberg spoke about her work, he emphasized the meta-perspective. She studied the transformation of the billiard table itself, which is changing its shape in a rule-governed way, not just the motion of the billiard balls. That is a description of a structural breakthrough, understanding the rules governing the dynamic system.
That's a compelling argument, but let's step back and consider the power of the Witten-Kontsevich formula connection. It flowed directly from her volume calculation in the thesis. And I'd argue it represents a far deeper unification than the dynamic analogies.
How so?
Well, think about the disciplines involved. She used Weyl-Peterson volumes, which are, geometric measure objects tied to differential geometry, to provide a new proof for results in intersection theory, which is squarely in algebraic geometry and topology. This was utterly unexpected. The quantitative geometric result provided the essential, explicit tool to unlock that deep topological connection. It wasn't just a conceptual realization. It was a hard, calculational proof that connected two previously separate worlds. That paper was foundational. It secured her early reputation. My concern with the structural claim is that it risks being a little vague. The magic wand concept is beautiful poetry, sure, but L to the 6G minus 6 is the specific, quantifiable metric that lets us build meaningful mathematical models.
I would argue the quantitative connection you prize relies fundamentally on the structural clarity I'm championing. While the calculation was powerful, it relies on the underlying system being conducive to long-term, asymptotic study. That's why the structural clarity provided by the ergodicity theory results is paramount. If the system, the movement described by Thurston's earthquake flow, if it weren't ergodicity, if the flow only reached isolated pockets of the moduli space, then the long-term counting precision of CL to the 6G minus 6 will be limited and functionally irrelevant to the overall geometry. Proving ergodicity confirms the system thoroughly explores the entire phase space. Doesn't that make the structural proof the more fundamental discovery, the bedrock for the calculation?
That's an excellent point about the necessity of ergodicity, but precision remains the ultimate hallmark of a mathematical breakthrough. Theoretical necessity is one thing. Successfully delivering the precise metric answer is another. Her entire trajectory, even starting with her undergraduate work on a simpler proof of a theorem of Shor, showed her deep drive for efficient, precise solutions. The volume calculation didn't just confirm the space was ergodicit, it showed how to measure its volume precisely, down to the polynomial rate. The complexity of the Weyl-Peterson metric and her ability to manipulate it to generate explicit constants, that's the genius. Ergodicity tells us where the path might go. The volume calculation tells us exactly how much space that path defines.
But that precision, which I fully respect, would be meaningless without the realization of the underlying rigidity. The dynamic structure of the moduli space is incredibly complex, And before Mirzakhani's work, we expected that complexity to yield only fractal or random closures for dynamic paths, just an overall lack of order. The rigidity theorem, proving that complex geodesics close in surprisingly regular ways, was the conceptual shockwave. It proved that even without the simplifying symmetries of homogeneous spaces, there is a deep underlying order. And this order is what allows us to define the precise measures you are celebrating. She essentially provided the framework that turned dynamic chaos into structured geometric regularity, and that elevated her contributions from solving a hard problem to creating a new conceptual tool for understanding highly complex dynamics.
I find that framework argument appealing, but let's not overlook the tangible consequences of the quantitative work. The explicit volume formulas she developed are tools of hard utility, immediately used in fields like quantum gravity and string theory, which rely on the intersection numbers of the Witten-Kontsevich formula. Her approach provided a computationally tractable way to understand these intersection numbers through geometric means. The quantitative connection has a massive immediate impact outside of pure geometry, serving as a vital bridge for mathematical physics. Whereas the structural work, while profound, remains largely within the realm of dynamics. The volume calculation actively provided a solution to an outstanding physics problem, making the quantifiable utility arguably broader in scope.
I think you might be conflating impact with foundational insight. The physics application is spectacular, no question, but the structural insights fundamentally alter the mathematical language we use to approach these problems. The insight that complex dynamics can be analyzed through the lens of homogeneous space theory is an intellectual shortcut, a reduction of complexity. Think about the dynamic analogy again. Mirzakhani's work showed that the earthquake flow, the limit of simple geometric deformations, explores the full phase space. This structural understanding of the limit behavior is critical. It moves beyond static geometric objects to defining the intrinsic rules governing geometric evolution itself. If we don't understand the structural rules of evolution, any single calculation is just a snapshot.
But the snapshot she provided in the L⁶ formula led to a cascade of other quantifiable results. The structural insight opens the door, the quantitative precision walks through it and builds the house. Without that initial quantification, how would we know the rigidity theory applies with such power? The results validated the theory.
I disagree. The structural proof of ergodicity and the rigidity results provided the necessary foundation that validated the methodology itself. They confirmed that the entire system possessed the required complexity and chaos, but also the necessary underlying order for the precise metric counting to even be relevant in the long term. If you focus solely on the numerical answer, you risk missing the profound conceptual analogy she discovered, that seemingly random dynamical systems can harbor deep, Ratner-like rigidity. It's this conceptual bridge, the echo, that shows her greatest genius was recognizing structure where others saw only noise.
But the Fields Medal citation emphasized both the dynamics and geometry of Riemann surfaces and their moduli spaces. The geometry component is intrinsically tied to the volumes and metrics, to the calculations that provide a specific numerical measure of the space. Her Fields Medal lecture even centered heavily on the counting problem and its connection to intersection theory. The quantitative results gave the structure measurable definition. They are the strongest pieces of evidence that her approach worked.
The quantitative results are certainly the most explicit evidence of success. I'll grant you that. But I maintain the structural insights are the most fundamental contribution. By proving the existence of order and the universality of the dynamics via ergodicity, she provided the framework that allows all subsequent quantitative work in Teichmüller theory to proceed with confidence. Without the structural guarantee that the dynamic system is well-behaved, those polynomial growth rates are locally true but globally unvalidated. The structural proof provides that global legitimacy.
So in summary, I believe Mirzakhani's legacy began and gained its decisive force through solving the long-standing problem of counting simple closed geodesics, providing the exact asymptotic CL to the 6G minus 6 by relating it directly to volume calculations. This quantitative success defined her initial trajectory. It demonstrated her mastery of complex geometric metrics, and it provided foundational proofs offering tangible, hard utility to the wider mathematical community.
And while that quantitative success is central, I hold that the deeper intellectual resonance comes from her later work on dynamics and rigidity, the structural understanding of Thurston's flow, and the surprising regularity of complex geodesics. Her greatest achievement was not solving a calculation, but creating a conceptual bridge showing that rigidity principles from symmetric spaces had a powerful echo in the complex, inhomogeneous world of moduli space. These structural insights elevated her contributions from solving a hard problem to redefining the conceptual architecture of geometric dynamics.
This discussion has really shown that Mirzakhani's monumental, albeit brief career is defined by a deep interplay between these two forces: her uncompromising drive for quantitative precision and her profound insight into structural analogies. To fully grasp her work, one has to acknowledge that her calculations provided proof of concept for her theories, and her theories provided the foundation for her calculations to have global relevance. There is clearly so much more to explore in the material she created.